Trump stated that he is ready to move to the second stage of sanctions against Russia. But in exchange, the US demanded that Europe buy American oil and gas. As it turned out, it wasn't a Shahed drone that hit the Ukrainian cabinet building, but a cruise missile from Kadyrov. Apparently, the Kremlin wants to see the flamingo. Deputy Chairman of Russia's Security Council Dmitry Medvedev once again escaped from the orderlies and started shouting that Finland is preparing to attack Russia. And a serious worsening of the illness for Don, Kadyrov declared that for peace to be achieved, Ukraine must become part of the Russian Federation. Then we'll cover all of this in more detail. Right now, and in the meantime, subscribe to the Ukraine Today channel and like this episode. Russian occupiers used a Shahed drone for the strike on the building of Ukraine's cabinet of ministers, as well as a Kh-22 cruise missile. This was reported by Defense Express and the EU ambassador to Ukraine, Katarina Mathanova. It is confirmed that a Kh-22 missile hit the government building and an analysis of the debris is underway. At the same time, the warhead of the missile did not detonate, and the fire on the upper floors of the cabinet building was caused by the ignition of rocket fuel. It really seems that Putin is going all in, and he is trying to distract from failures at the front with such actions. Especially since Ukraine is successfully counterattacking in the hottest sectors of the front, the Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, Syrsky, has revealed all the details. Meanwhile, the war is drawing ever closer to old Europe. The largest Ukrainian drone manufacturer will build a factory in Britain, and Putin may invade the Suwalki corridor, the Achilles heel. All of this and more in our military review.
They are destroying the enemy and reclaiming Ukrainian territories. The Ukrainian armed forces have liberated the village of Vladimirovka in the Kramatorsk region and have also pushed the occupiers back from 3 other settlements. According to analysts, Ukrainian troops have driven Russian forces away from Razin, Zolotoy Kolodets, and Novotoretskoye.
The advance of Ukraine's defense forces in the Razin area removes for the time being the possibility of restoring direct control over the main location of Ukraine's defense forces. This is the highway in the Rodenskaya area. This is a significant tactical success for Ukraine's defense forces. Regarding Zolotoy Kolodets and Novotoretskoye, these are in the Pokrovsk direction, which indicates stabilization measures by Ukraine's defense forces in this area.
And while the occupiers are counting their losses at the front, in Russia they are counting their financial losses. The armed forces of Ukraine attacked the Ivsky oil refinery in the Krasnodar region with drones. The Druzhba oil pipeline was also hit once again, this time in Naitopovichi-Bryansk region. This facility is of strategic importance for supplying petroleum products to the Russian occupation army. But the enemy is not idle either. On Sunday night, Russian terrorists launched a combined attack on Ukraine using missiles and drones. At the same time, the number of weapons used was the largest since the start of the full-scale invasion. For the first time during the war, a building of the cabinet of ministers in Kyiv's government quarter was damaged during the attack. There were also strikes on the Kyiv bridge over the Dnipro in the Poltava region. According to a recent and widely circulated British publication, the largest and most devastating attack on Ukraine clearly demonstrates the Russian dictator's unwavering unwillingness to bring an end to the ongoing and brutal war, and the deliberate and destructive shelling of the Ukrainian government building, a significant and symbolic target. Foreign observers write that this is a deliberate element of Putin's strategy.
Main audience for these demonstrative actions by the occupation army is first and foremost the American establishment. Moreover, I would like to point out that once again, strikes are being carried out both on the government quarter and on the logistical infrastructure of the Ukrainian side, as well as on the energy systems of the Ukrainian economy, right on the eve of Trump's meeting with European leaders, where first and foremost the so-called issues of Ukrainian state security will be discussed. That is, the so-called security guarantees.
Already on Sunday night, the aggressor country launched a new massive attack on Ukraine's energy system. One of the thermal power generation facilities in the Kyiv region came under attack.
Unfortunately, the Russian Federation is increasing the number of strikes, particularly on energy facilities within our country. This has already become a constant tactic of the Russian occupation forces, either at the beginning or during the heating season, to plunge Ukraine into darkness, both literally and figuratively.
To fight against the occupiers, Ukraine is doing everything possible, developing its military-industrial complex. The largest Ukrainian drone manufacturer will build a drone production plant in the United Kingdom. Serial production is planned to start at the beginning of next year.
In addition to the United Kingdom, there are large-scale projects for joint UAV production in Denmark, Germany, and a number of other European countries. This is evidence that European partners, understanding Ukraine's need and the strength of its defense, are increasing the number of strike capabilities. First and foremost, this concerns strike drones with a range of over 1,500 kilometers, and accordingly, the production of FPV drones is being scaled up.
Meanwhile, Putin may be preparing for yet another war. The Russian dictator might attempt an invasion through the Achilles heel, the Suwałki corridor.
At the moment, Russia has not escalated this issue given the international efforts, primarily from the American side, to end the war in Ukraine. In other words, we can view this as an element of military political pressure on European partners and the United States. In other words, the Russian Federation is proposing a scenario of non-interference in the internal affairs of these countries, primarily Poland and the Baltic states, and their possible occupation in exchange for concessions on the Ukrainian issue, specifically territorial concessions from our country, and above all, full control by Russian occupation forces over the territory of Donetsk region.
Let us recall that analysts from the Institute for the Study of War have noted that the head of the Kremlin is making long-term plans for rearmament. At the same time, Moscow is intensifying the mobilization of the Russian population and economy.
They've been hit even in the Far East. The main intelligence directorate of the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine attacked a Russian army unit in Khabarovsk that was involved in war crimes in the Kyiv region. Servicemen who directly participated in the aggression against Ukraine were eliminated. This was reported by sources in the main intelligence directorate. Explosions occurred on the territory of the military unit, a unit that took part in crimes against Ukrainians in 2022, particularly in the Kyiv region. It is noted that 2 explosive devices were placed in the parking lot and detonated precisely when Russian soldiers were arriving for duty. There are dead and wounded. Kadyrov is having an autumn episode. Dondon declared that for peace to be achieved, Ukraine must become part of the Russian Federation, a new fit from Orban as well. He stated that Ukraine's fate has supposedly already been decided, and after the war ends, the country will be divided into 3 zones: Russian, demilitarized, and Western. At the same time, according to him, the division has already begun and the Russian zone already exists now. Meanwhile, US President Trump expressed dissatisfaction that Russia is shelling Ukraine and promised to resolve everything. All the details are in our international review.
So, what is Putin aiming for? The occupation of Ukraine, and that's no secret at all. But who is actually winning, the Kremlin dictator or Ukraine?
Putin, of course, wants to fully occupy us. For him, that is victory. And as long as he can't achieve that, the victory is on our side. That's why, for us, survival is victory. Because we survive thanks to our identity, our country, our independence.
It's also hard to forget Putin's hospitality, namely his invitation to the president of Ukraine for a meeting.
If we're told we want our meeting, but you have to go there for it. But it seems to me that these are simply excessive demands being made of us. Secondly, once again, if someone really wants to meet with us, we are ready. The best time and place for this is the capital of the Russian Federation.
Well, of course. Then what about another new place for negotiations? In principle, it's not that far for Putin either.
He can come to Kyiv. You know, if a person doesn't want to meet during a war, of course he can suggest something that might be acceptable to me or to others. But that's understandable. I can't go to Moscow when my country is under missile attacks every day. I can't go to the capital of this terrorist. In
principle, Putin's goals were confirmed by Kadyrov when he stated that the war in Ukraine would only end when it becomes part of the Russian Federation. You see, such security guarantees are for all of Russia. So what then? Are all these games by Putin instead of a meeting just games after all?
In 2026, there will be midterm elections for Trump, and he doesn't have much time left to actively deal with the issue of regulating the Russian-Ukrainian war. So Putin just needs to wait. And we see that in this strategy, this waiting is quite justified for Putin, as are both the mid-shows and the meetings with the countries of the global south. He continues to wage war and no sanctions are being imposed. He has an established track record of relations with Trump.
But wait, it's not time to despair. After all, Trump promised to resolve everything and also stated that he is ready to move on to the second phase of sanctions against Russia. But as always, he didn't specify any timelines.
Well, as for Russia, no one has been tougher than me. This, in particular, is related to the Nord Stream 2 pipeline and many other things. But I am not satisfied. Europe and some European leaders will come to our country on Monday or Tuesday, some of them individually. And I think we will resolve this. We will resolve this.
Ultimately, Putin has managed to achieve quite a lot, unfortunately, in the implementation of his policies. And since his inauguration, Trump has not managed to achieve anything at all in terms of bringing about any result in ending the Russian-Ukrainian war. Why? Because once again, he does not use force against Putin for various reasons. Sometimes he doesn't want to, sometimes he can't.
A buffer zone on the territory of Ukraine under US control. Western media report that the US is ready to take a leading role in monitoring a large buffer zone as a means of protecting Ukraine from Russia after the war.
The United States is proposing to utilize its advanced technological capabilities, such as sophisticated satellites, so that the comprehensive monitoring of the ceasefire regime and this particular buffer zone, about which there is still no clear understanding or full clarity on precisely where and exactly how it might be effectively established, can be reliably done without the subjective factor of human assessment and interpretation. In fact, this is a good initiative on the part of the United States.
But Orb has his own vision of the situation. He has already drawn up a division of Ukraine into 3 zones, and one of them, the Russian zone, already exists.
This is happening now. This will be the second zone. The result of the division of Ukraine will be a Russian zone, a demilitarized zone, and eventually a Western zone, the outlines and conditions of which we do not yet know for sure.
Moreover, he also stated that the collapse of Ukraine would pose a threat to Hungary itself.
Of course, this is again apparently just talk, not to be taken literally, but there is a nuance here, because perhaps this is a certain hint at what the Kremlin should be thinking about. Meanwhile,
the Kremlin states that Putin is very fond of historical and documentary films. But what's interesting is this.
Well,
of course, what books could Putin possibly read if all they do is talk about the Putin dictatorship?
Another flare-up from Daimon. Deputy Chairman of the Security Council Dmitry Medvedev stated that after joining NATO, Finland is preparing a springboard for an attack on Russia under the guise of strengthening its defense. Helsinki is pursuing a confrontational course, preparing for war with Russia. It seems they are preparing a springboard for an attack on us, he wrote in a column for TASS. Medvedev accused Finnish President Alexander Stubb of pushing the country toward military conflict, adding that the desire to profit at Russia's expense had been instilled in Finnish minds since the time of Hitler. At the same time, the deputy chairman of the Security Council warned Helsinki that another act of aggression against Russia would lead to the collapse of Finnish statehood once and for all. On the one hand, everyone is already used to such performances by Putin's jester. On the other hand, I want to remind you that before the full-scale invasion of Ukraine, Moscow accused Kyiv of preparing for war with the Russian Federation in much the same tone. Russia itself is awash in weapons that are being illegally taken from the front. The number of people convicted for such crimes has tripled. But that's just a drop in the ocean, because many more newly minted arms barons remain uncaught. Everything is being taken out from the front of the Russian-Ukrainian war, from pistols to grenade launchers. And then, with the help of these weapons, robberies and murders can be committed. Russian children can bring them to school to take revenge on their bullies or even teachers. About how Russia is being stuffed with illegal weapons. Watch further.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine Today. Join us now.
We must carefully shape the country's future elite, those who will lead and guide our nation.
After the start of the full-scale war in Ukraine, the number of criminal cases against Russian servicemen under articles related to illegal arms trafficking has increased at least threefold.
And so now,
if in the year 2021 there were 41 such registered cases, by the year 2023 their total number had significantly grown to 137. And while the Russian Federation is being increasingly filled with illegal weapons and illicit arms, government officials frequently talk about the supposed heroic actions and bravery of Russian soldiers to deliberately hide the truth from the public.
Today, our guys, regardless of nationality or religion, are defending people's lives from the brown plague, just as their grandfathers and great-grandfathers did. More than 400,000 people have received state awards, and over 300 have become heroes of Russia.
The truth about those who are supposedly supposed to protect us is very bitter. Murder upon returning home, robberies, and blackmail. These so-called heroes are bringing everything from pistols to grenade launchers into civilian life. Among them are those who deserted their units, those who managed to escape and are harder to find, for example, even in Bakhchisarai. Alexei Merznakov, who was wanted by the police, was found in possession of an electric detonator and 600 rounds of ammunition.
I want to express my profound and sincere gratitude for your thoughtful choice and your decisive actions in diligently defending the vital interests of our beloved country and its cherished citizens. For our part, we are doing everything to ensure that our guys, participants in the special military operation, and their families lack nothing. Our President, Vladimir Vladimirovich Putin, is doing everything for this.
Both mobilized soldiers and career military personnel with years of service end up on the defendant's bench. In the Ironitskaya region, a serviceman from the Akhmat regiment, Bekan Masayev, was detained. A large arsenal was found in the trunk of his Toyota Land Cruiser, 12 Kalashnikov assault rifles, 5 foreign rifles, 6 machine guns, a sniper rifle, an underbarrel grenade launcher, 2 Glock pistols, a magazine, and more than 3,000 rounds of ammunition. Masayev stated that the weapons were trophies and had been brought from the combat zone in Ukraine. Weapons and ammunition are often found among soldiers' personal belongings during inspections at train stations and airports. It was recently discovered by Deputy Gurulev that the metal detectors at Sheremetyevo do not react to grenades and ammunition.
Unfortunately, soldiers returning from the special military operation can bring a grenade or ammunition with them. But you have a security system. There are metal detectors at the entrance. You know, we do have metal detectors, but unfortunately they might not catch everything. Whoa!
At Saratov airport, a military medic was detained for transporting 60 rounds of ammunition he had found in the trenches.
Kirillov thought that unregistered ammunition could simply be taken for himself, which is exactly what he did. He put the found ammunition into his duffel bag and carried it with him. At Gagarin airport, security staff discovered the dangerous luggage and its owner was detained.
In Yuli, Dagestan, fighters from the Mata Adam Kazbakparov group were also caught. In his car, they found 2 hand grenades, a fragmentation round for a grenade launcher, and about 50 cartridges. The junior sergeant, who had participated in the war in Ukraine, on the contrary, was detained while returning from leave. He was found to have 74 Kalashnikov rifle cartridges. As a rule, servicemen claim that they forgot to report the found trophies or to take them out of their personal belongings.
They make us let our guard down, you see. But we're supposed to fight if you've taken on this job.
The arms market is an age-old business.
So in the spring of 2022, but apparently even now, at this present moment, and even about a year ago, this particular market was not very noticeable, not very large, at least on the surface, it seemed. That is to say, it's probably either hidden much, much deeper within the system, or it's very closely and intricately intertwined with real, tangible offline crime and established law enforcement agencies.
The price of a Kalashnikov rifle in Russia in 2025 starts at 300,000 rubles. And in 2022, they were being sold for 52,000. A Makarov pistol in 2022 could be bought for 23,000 rubles. But in 2025, it's 300,000 to 350,000.
To buy a weapon, you need to know some law enforcement officers who would sell it to you.
2 servicemen from the 71st Motor Rifle Division stole 3 rifles, more than 1,000 rounds of ammunition, and a few grenades from a warehouse, after which they sold the rifles to residents of a neighboring village for 15,000 rubles each. And if until 2022 such cases were mostly considered in Moscow, the North Caucasus, and the Far East, then after 2022, about a quarter of all cases were transferred to border courts in Kursk and Crimea. The thing is, most servicemen are given suspended sentences or fines by the courts. He threatened Zenit Rafeyan with a Makarov pistol and received a 3.5-year suspended sentence. Actual prison terms are given to military personnel in 40% of cases.
The pace is quite good and decent. As of the 1st of July, more than 210,000 individuals have arrived at various different military units, such as battalions and regiments.
The number of contract soldiers is growing, says Medvedev, and with it, the number of crimes is also increasing. The return of hundreds of thousands of people from Putin's war threatens Russia with a surge in crime.
Karma is a serious thing. Russian propagandist and editor-in-chief of Russia Today, Margarita Simonyan, has announced a serious illness that could lead to her resignation from her position. The Russian propagandist, known for her outspoken support of the war against Ukraine and calls for the destruction of Ukrainians, announced on the program Evening with Solovyov that doctors had discovered she had a serious illness. She noted that she would have to undergo surgery, pointing to the left side of her chest. Later, Simonyan hinted that it was a mastectomy. Let me remind you that Simonyan's husband, director and Russian propagandist Tigran Keosayan, has been in a coma for 9 months without any improvement. Officials, like all other residents of Russia, are being forced to urgently look for alternatives to Telegram and WhatsApp. So why aren't they switching to Max? In mid-August, the Russian authorities blocked calls on the most popular messengers, WhatsApp and Telegram. At the same time, they launched an unprecedented campaign to promote the so-called national messenger, Max. Residents of the Russian Federation are being forced to switch to this service through advertising, persuasion, and threats. But why are even Russian officials afraid of Max? We'll talk about this in our next segment. While you're watching, don't forget to like this episode and subscribe to the YouTube channel Ukraine Today.
The digital chaos continues in Russia. This summer, the authorities began restricting calls on Telegram and WhatsApp.
Starting September 1st, 2025, literally everything was banned in Russia.
For millions of users, this came as a shock. Familiar messengers started glitching and calls were simply dropping. Ads for the domestic messenger are literally everywhere.
Take care of yourselves.
Take care of yourselves.
At the same time, officials were also required to switch to the new state messenger, Max. The presidential administration directly demanded that all official channels must be transferred there. Telegram remains, but as a secondary option. Regional authorities went even further. In St. Petersburg, Novosibirsk, Kuzbas, and Tatarstan, school chats and work correspondence have already been moved to Max. The deadlines are strict. The transition must be completed by the end of the quarter.
Starting
from September 1st, this messenger will become even more mandatory. Now it will be pre-installed on all new smartphones and tablets in Russia. And the law has already been signed by Vladimir Putin.
Electronic stores are required to install this application on all smartphones. In other words, you simply won't be able to buy a phone without Max. Everything on your phone, basically your whole life, will end up in a building on Lubyanka. All thanks to the national messenger, Max.
Officially, Max is advertised as a convenient and more secure application. But experts warn that it's not just a messenger but a tool for total surveillance. User data is stored on government servers. The app requests access to your camera, microphone, geolocation, and files. Moreover, researchers have found evidence that Max may remain in the system even after being deleted.
This is Sergei Boyarsky, a State Duma deputy from United Russia. He has become the main promoter of the national messenger. This is what his Telegram channel feed looks like today. Almost every third post is about Max. In one of them, the deputy admits Max leaks user data to law enforcement. By the way, this is also stated in the messenger's user agreement.
Ordinary users can feel it. Officials aren't eager to switch either, but they're left with almost no choice. His telegrams are being strangled by restrictions from the Central Administrative Panel. Max is being pushed through advertising, orders, and fear.
Another political technologist working with the Kremlin says that for him and all his acquaintances, the call blocking has caused serious everyday inconveniences. Now they have to arrange calls in advance and then turn on a VPN to talk via Telegram on his Central Administrative Panel. Here's his quote. "The free VPN is slow, the paid one is fast, no problems. The messaging still stays in Telegram on his Central Administrative Panel. You write a message, give a heads up, then call." You have to warn people because the VPN isn't always on. When it's on, some Russian websites and payment parking apps don't work. That leads to another inconvenience. There's no constant connection.
The authorities dream of repeating the Chinese experience, creating a super app through which you can make calls, payments, access government services, and have a digital passport. But for now, in reality, it's more of a trap. A digital pen where every message, every call, every action can end up under government control.
Not even housing, but you can hear everything.
With this messenger, you'll never feel lonely. And I know that I'm always being heard and they always know where I am.
In conclusion, the whole country, from ordinary citizens to officials, has found itself facing a choice. People got used to Telegram and its features, but they've been squeezed out by the system. Max is pushing methodical advertising and pressure. But what happens next?